you're a very results-oriented professional, but you didn't have that vision of becoming a franchisor from the very beginning. How did that happen?
I believe it happened because after I had a few franchises open, I started to go into these annual conventions and seeing other franchisees that had 5 or more locations, and they were sometimes father and sons, and they would tell me they're buying their own property and they're building them. I'm like, wow. I went to my wife, we could do that. I said, why don't we do that? This way we can secure our future with actually having real estate behind us too. And I just thought that was really cool. So I actually went back and I told my wife, I want to buy a property. I want to open up this my own business and my own building.
Welcome to the Franchise Hot Seat Podcast, where we talk about all things franchising. Now, here's your host, Dr. John P. Hayes.
Hi, I'm John Hayes, and I have another podcast today with my guest, Charles Bonfiglio of Tint World, based in South Florida. And he's got an amazing story, an entrepreneurship story as well. And he's built a dynamic business behind Tint World. And Charlie, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
Hi, John. This is great to be here with you today.
Appreciate that. So, Charlie, you have been with Tint World since about 2006, 2007. Prior to that, you had your own independent shops that were in the automotive niche and doing window tinting. So before franchising, what was life like? You're going back a ways.
Well, actually, that's not entirely the way it happened. I moved down to Florida at 21 years old. I just decided I want to open up a business in the aftermarket accessory world, car stereos. I moved down to Florida. I bought a one-way ticket, a plane ticket to come to Florida, and I tried to get myself set up. And I went in looking for a lease. And the landlord says, no, that's not a real business. We don't want a lease to that. We want like existing businesses that are brands. So then I went to the bank and I tried to borrow some money because I needed, a certain amount to start my business plan. And, the bank said, no, we don't have any loans for that. And so a family member that that lived in Brooklyn moved to New Jersey, and he told me, listen, I started a new business. I said, what is it? He goes, it's Meineke Discount Mufflers. I said, Meineke? He goes, yeah. He goes, him and his brother opened up the first store, and about a year later, they were working on a second store. They were doing really well. And he told me, this is a good brand. And he told me, maybe you want to try it out. And so from that point, I called up Meineke. First, I looked around if there was another franchise because I didn't even know what franchising was at that age.
Yeah.
At that time. There was nothing for me in the area of aftermarket accessories or car stereo. So I called up and talked to Meineke about this and filled out the application. And a couple of weeks later, I got a letter in the mail saying, you've been preliminary approved for a Meineke Discount Muffler shops. And they gave me the next steps. And from that point, I moved forward. I opened up my first store in Hallandale Beach, Florida, which actually was the same landlord that said no to me when I went back to him and said, I got this letter from Meineke. We'll give you an end cap, we'll give you some build out, we'll give you some free rent to get started.
The power of a brand.
It was amazing. It was the same person, the same desire, only with a brand name behind me. It really, and I went back to the bank and I said to the same girl, by the way, you told me no for a loan. I just got, we have a special SBA loan for that. We can give it, here's the paperwork. So everything changed when I ordered by a franchise company.
Which demonstrates the power of a brand and demonstrates the power of franchising over at the bank, which works to the advantage of so many people today. So you were a Meineke franchisee, which I did not know, and then at some point you had your own independent shops.
So as I started opening up more franchises with Meineke, I wound up opening a total of 10 over the years. From 1983 to 2001 was my last one. I opened up in the last bunch of stores. They were the biggest stores in the chain, and I was in Florida, so Meineke doesn't do really well with mufflers in Florida. We don't have the salt and the rain and the snow and the potholes. So I started expanding my services, and I became a test center for Meineke on expansion of services. And then later on in the late 90s, when exhaust started to go away with the EPA laws extending the lifelong of the catalytic converters, and the exhaust pipes went from galvanized to stainless and aluminized, they last longer. So Meineke actually took their team and came down to Florida to my test center and said, how do we do all this? And then I helped them expand their services with addendums to all their stores based on the size of the store and the amount of loss of exhaust work. And so it was a really good experience. I learned how to buy property and build my own buildings and lease them for my franchises. So it gave me ability to, when I paid my loans off, I would have incremental incremental income. So that really gave me the power to when in 2006, I told my wife, I don't want to really open up any more Meineke shops. She was, why and what? And I said, well, I just think I want to build the brand I always dreamed of. And so, but along the way, one of the locations that I had in Fort Lauderdale, they were building a new property a couple of doors down, and I wanted to move my Meineke store to that new building because it was going to be nice, but I didn't want anybody to take the old building. And there was a couple of guys that were doing detailing on the corner, and I said, guys, I got this building I'm moving out of. Why don't we go partners on this little business? And I opened up a tinting and accessory business called Total Auto Concepts, and it actually became pretty good. It was actually doing, as a store, it was doing just as good as my Meineke franchises were. I kept that for several years, and then when I wanted to start buying property, I really didn't want any of the stores that I had that I didn't own the property in. So I sold them, took that money, I started buying real estate, building my own buildings, became a general contractor, and then I started building my own buildings for my Meineke centers, and then I really took off because I was building beautiful buildings in the right neighborhoods, where I knew that there was good business, and so I grew them. And then, like I said, after 2001 was my last store that I opened, and in 2006, when I told my wife I wanted to do this other thing, she says, well, you're going to start from scratch? I said, well, I don't know. I said, there's this company called Tint World. They started in 1982 with one store. I says, and now they got about 6 locations. They're not really, all that, but I like the name, I like the brand. They got 6 locations. So I offered to take the guy out to lunch. I called him up. I says, would you like to go out to lunch with me? I want to talk to you about some opportunities. I was known by a lot of the people in the automotive world and in the community. So he says, yeah, I know who you are, Charles. Let's go to lunch. So I went out to lunch with him and offered him that I'd like to buy his stores. And lo and behold, about a month or two later, I wound up securing a deal with him that I bought out all the locations and the signs and the brand and the assets to the company. And that's how I started Tint World. And I tell you, this is a unique story you may not know, John. I don't say this all the time, but after I actually hired a company to consult with me on writing the FDD. And so I did. And when I was done with it, I didn't know how to sell franchise. I knew about operations and franchises because I was a franchisee. I worked very much with my franchisor. I was on the FAC Advisory Council. I was also instrumental in helping them with their first point of sale software that connected the dots for reporting and royalties and having cataloging for their products. So I really got involved with that, and I got to know all the people at corporate, and they taught me a lot. So when I was ready to open up the franchise, I knew the business operations of Tint World. I wrote the operations manual, I wrote the FDD, but when I went to go launch, I didn't know anything about sales. I didn't know how to sell a franchise. And so I looked around and said, who can I find as a mentor that can give me some ideas of how to do this? I called up and I found Ray Titus up in a United Franchise Group. He was really big in the Sinorama world, and I read his story, and I'm like, wow, I wonder if he would talk to me. So I actually gave a call, and it was actually Tony Foley, his international guy, that actually answered the phone and said, yeah, Charlie, I love what you're doing. Come on and talk to us. And so I went up there, and I took everything. I took my FDD, I took my brochures, I took everything that I can bring, my operation manual, and I went in, he showed me the whole tour of the place. I was so impressed, gave me a glimpse of what I could be one day, and then he called in Ray Titus, and he sat with me. And after spending a couple of hours there, Ray just gave me some basic fundamental advice, get yourself a 800 number, get yourself a training center in one of your stores, make that store the nicest one you have so you have a good discovery day when they come down. And he goes, by the way, when you get this thing filed, because I hadn't filed it, I just wrote everything, I was looking for the advice before I filed, and when you get filed and you're approved in the States, he goes, let me know and maybe I'll sell franchises for you. And I said, really? And he goes, yeah. So I called him back a couple of months later. I said, Ray, I'm approved in all the states. I just got approved. Let's get going. This is early 2007. Yeah. And he said, come on up here. And then I went up there, and that's how it all started, selling franchises. Ray sold franchises for about a year. In 2008, there was a pretty big, tough market.
Yes.
And he decided he wanted to not be, he had to focus on his own, not on selling others. So, but I learned a lot in that 1 year. And from there, I actually hired a franchise director, and he's been with me ever since. And here we are, 15 years later, and doing what we're doing.
How many franchises total in how many states and countries? And
so we have just about 150 locations. They're opening up all the time. So I think just 149 or 150. We're in 4 countries, predominantly in the United States. Yeah. We have about 5 in Canada with 2 in development. We have, I think, 143 or 43 in the United States with 85 or 87 in development. And we have 1 in Saudi Arabia. It was a mastermind to franchise. He just built one, so he's not a master any longer, but he's doing well. Our brand works well there. And we have a master in the UAE, in Dubai, and he has one store open. He's working on a second. So it works everywhere. I loved it. When I went to Dubai, I helped them open up the first store. A great group of people and really good partner.
So one of the interesting things about your story, the Charles Bonfiglio story, is that you didn't even know what franchising was. You didn't begin as, okay, I'm going to go buy a franchise brand, but you did. And then after a period of time, you realized, well, I could do this for myself. I could establish my own brand and become a franchisor. How did that journey work? It wasn't that you're a very results-oriented professional, but you didn't have that vision of becoming a franchisor from the very beginning. How did that happen?
I believe it happened because after I had a few franchises open, I started to go into these annual conventions and seeing other franchisees that had 5 or more locations, and they were sometimes father and sons, and they would tell me they're buying their own property and they're building them. I'm like, wow. I went to my wife, we could do that. I said, why don't we do that? This way we can secure our future with actually having real estate behind us too. And I just thought that was really cool. So I actually went back and I told my wife, I want to buy a property. I want to open up this my own business and my own building. So that's where it started. But in the early 90s, Meineke at one of the conventions, they said, guys, we're writing these handwritten receipts and customers are complaining. They can't read them. We have this new Radio Shack computer that came out and basically a dot matrix printer. So if we need somebody to kind of help us, maybe we can mature this thing. And everybody at the convention, they were a lot older than me. They were all, no, we don't want no computers. And I was like, I'll do it. And they're like, Bonfiglio, come on up here. So I ran up there. I was so excited that I got chosen. And we're going to send a computer to all your locations. And we want you to tell us what we can do to, we're going to hook you up with this software company. You're going to speak with them once or twice a week on certain days and test things out and tell them how we can make the business better. And I love that. So I did that for years. And so every quarter, Meineke would fly me up to corporate up in North Carolina. I'd sit at the boardroom table with them and I'd have a list of items. I'd say, I want to do this. I want to do this. And they would say, Charles, we appreciate your enthusiasm, but we just want these few things. And so, but I loved it. And so that really gave me like my own way of developing the system through the software. Even Meineke wasn't aware of all the things I was doing for them and with them. And afterwards, it wanted to be that the franchisees were very resistant to buying this software. They didn't want to do it. So at the annual conventions, I became a trainer. And I stood up in front of all of them and I said, guys, let me ask you, how many of you guys know, how many employees you got? Well, we got 3, 4 employees. And well, who's doing the most amount of work? I don't know. They all work. I'm like, well, look at my report. I can see everybody, what they're doing, how many they're making, and what, and I'm paying them commission. Like, really? So I started to inspire them all with the numbers and the results of the point of sale software to buy it. Lo and behold, we got everybody signed up over the couple of years. I started being a trainer of expanding those services on how do you do these other services. And that's really where I got involved with the franchisor. And I was so inquisitive. Like after our meetings up at Charlotte, North Carolina, with these board meetings, I would walk downstairs. They would all go to the bar across the street. I don't drink, so it was like lemon water, but they were all having a couple of drinks. I was like, how do you do that? And what does this one get paid? And how do you do this? And I would go to one time I got caught with the CFO in an airport. We got stuck in Long Island. We're at the software company and we were like both delayed. Inside the airport on a 3 or 4 hour delay, we started drafting what reports we wanted out of the point of sale. And he taught me information about finance and reporting that I didn't even know. So that gave me a really big boost of how to grow this brand. So yeah, it was a great experience.
Yeah, well, you're an inspiration for the guy who puts together a business and doesn't realize he needs a brand. Then he realized, well, brands are more important. Brands attract more money. And then franchising. How did you have to sell yourself on becoming a franchisee? Because you're a pretty independent guy. And in franchising, you've got to follow a system. And if you don't, you're probably not going to succeed. Was that a hurdle for you to decide, all right, I'm going to do the Meineke system?
It really wasn't. I mean, in the beginning, you start with a system and a blueprint of how to run the business, which is really good because it gets you going. But you can't just, the system is important to follow. Putting your own efforts and your own personality and your own drive, building a team, that's something that you have to do yourself. And the better you are at building a team and inspiring your team, your customers, your accounts, you could become better. You can't just sit there and wait for the system to just manifest all the sales. It doesn't work that way. It's not a slot machine. It's not a gumball machine. You can't just put money in and it comes out. But you do have a system that if you put the time and effort in and you follow that system and and maybe even add some value to it, you can get that thing to roll. And I became one of the top franchisees in the company because of it. And I actually enjoy training other franchisees how they can level up and get to become $1 million store.
So you knew how to build a team. You have that naturally. You have charisma that people want to work with, Charles. So that part makes sense. But the tripping point, almost for you and initially for you, and for many, many, many emerging franchise companies that just aren't going to make it, or they spend all this money to become a franchise only to find out 3 years later they haven't sold a franchise, or they've sold 2 or 3. How did you get over that? How did you manage to say, all right, we can master franchise development?
So I was very fortunate because I understood how to build and expand my categories of services. And so when I bought the Tint World franchise into a business and converted to a franchise, I realized I can't just do one service for tint or just a little bit of detailing. I wanted to expand those categories the same way I did with Meineke. And by doing that, I could have multiple revenue streams for the owners, and they can actually have, depending on what time of year it is, certain services are bigger than others. And when I was in Meineke in the summer, air conditioning service was, they pay almost anything to get their air conditioning fixed. In the winter, you couldn't sell it at all. Same thing with window tint. So I had to get those other services, aftermarket accessories that would allow me to be profitable all year long and train. And that's something that really nobody's ever done in the aftermarket. So I took my auto repair experience from, maintenance and repair and tires, and I expanded into, tint and films and accessories and wheels and all the other things, and detailing and ceramic coating, and I did that. What's more is I felt like we could do home services. So now we're making a big push for window tinting on homes. On a mobile unit is completely separate from the auto center, but it's a division that we're working on now and developing. It's just something that I wanted to develop, and when I went into it, it just seemed it was a sexy business. People just wanted to buy it, and I was happy to train them the same way I trained any other Meineke franchisee. So I didn't think of it any different. I just helped them to do what I already did well.
So in the beginning, when you sold franchises, did you train the franchisees, or did you turn that over to someone else?
John, I was a one-man band until I got to about 25 stores.
Okay.
I literally would treat every franchise prospect like they were going to be my partner. I'd look at financials and say, if I was them, this is what I'm going to do. What type of lease am I going to get that they can afford? What type of people? How many should I hire? I would come in, I would do the full training for 3 weeks with all the franchisees, some 3, some 10 at a time. And as I was doing these trainings, I basically got better at what I was doing because I was training what I already knew. But when you train people, you actually get better. It reinforces what you know. And then I'd go to their stores and I'd actually work with them for a week or 2 to show them how it was done and work with them myself. And that was a learning experience. When I got to about 25, I realized I needed some more support. I had one bookkeeper, I had one guy helping me with real estate and sales. And from that point, it was all me. And we got to about 25, I started hiring some teams. One was I wanted to hire a vendor manager, would get the best deals for my franchisees. So I hired somebody that was already in that industry, and it was a subcontract for a period of, like a partial, I had to grow. And that's another thing I want to say about franchising. You can't go into franchising unless you have the financial wherewithal. A lot of these, startups, they say, I have 2 or 3 stores, I'm good, I can build this, I can make more money. No, you're not going to. It's going to be at least over 50 before you're going to make any money if you really want to build a substantial franchise, because you got to put the money in to invest it and grow people, and you're going to keep growing people. Once you get somewhere, but depending on how much the average store sales are, because you get paid a percentage of the gross sales, somewhere between 50 to 100 is where that sweet spot will be, where you can actually start making some money. And if you don't have that mindset and you're trying to make all you can off franchisees and not really trying to build a system, and it's not going to be successful. So stick with 1 or 2 or 3 that you're going to build your own.
Early on, you had Ray Titus and United Franchise Group help you selling franchises. But when did you feel like, okay, I can sell franchises? That was a different discipline for you, I think.
Yeah, I still don't sell any franchises. Usually I don't meet franchise prospects until they come down Discovery Day. But I get to know what they've been through. So I get to know, okay, they go through the process, they have their first, second. I wrote the system for them, so I don't want them to go to step 2 until they get through step 1 and so forth. So I have a 4 to 6 week plan to be able to buy a franchise when somebody hits that that landing page or hits the website, and we get that first call or lead. So once we get through that, I call it like a 10-step process to buy a franchise, and you have a 2-week in between when you're going to go through the disclosure document. And I feel it's really important for them to understand your disclosure document, your business system, your method. If they read it by themselves, they just see I have to do. But if you read it with them, you can tell them the why and tell them the story behind it, and they get to appreciate it. So once you get through that FDD, now it's like, okay, where are we going to open? How many are we going to open? We focus on that. When they come down to Discovery Day, they already know me. I have a lot of videos out there about my life, about my franchising, whether it be on the website or on YouTube, and they see that, so they already feel like a little connected with me. And I didn't do this by plan. It just happenstance to be that way. But when they come down, I make sure that they want to, what do you want to know if you're a franchisee? You want to know who's going to help you find a location, who's going to help you build it out, who's going to help you do your grand opening and your marketing, and who's going to help you do your financing through the whole process, and then who's going to be your operation team. What are they going to do for you? So I put the head of each department in that order that they meet with them for a half an hour or so during that Discovery Day to know what each department head does for them. And then I'm usually the last one that comes in and works with them and talks about, me, my story, how I did it, where we are, where we're growing to, and anything that maybe they have questions beyond what they were answered from all my team along the way.
So for every 10 prospects who come to a Discovery Day, how many of them will end up becoming franchisees with you?
99.9%.
Okay, great. United Franchise Group has that same kind of a record, so I think you had some good training there in the beginning. You spoke about technology, the Radio Shack computer. That dates us. There are a lot of people who are in my audience who don't even know that there was a Radio Shack, a brand at one point in time, let alone a Radio Shack computer. But my point here is technology, you embraced it from the beginning, and you still are developing, promoting, using technology to get you to the next level in Tint World. Would you talk about that experience and focus on some of what you're doing today with technology?
Yes. So again, because I was so involved with the technology, I was the person that was instrumental in helping first report royalties and sales through pressing the button on the computer through fax, and then electronically sending the information, and then sending EFT, ACH, payments, so we didn't have to write a check and send it. I helped them with all that. With all the reporting, I got knowledge. But the problem is that I saw when I became a franchisor, I wanted more. And technology had advanced from when I was with Meineke, and my ability to do anything I wanted to do was I put my money where my mouth is. If I thought it was going to be good for my company to grow, and it was something I wanted. Let me give you a quick tidbit. When I was growing and I had all these franchises with Meineke, the biggest thing that held me back was that my wife did the bookwork. She was my CFO, so to speak. And she was working more than I was. She was working harder to run all these stores and all these financials and everything that I was. And I just felt, you know what? We have to automate this. We have to get it where franchisees don't have either themselves or their wives slowing down their growth, because the sales and operations part is going good, sales, marketing, operations, but the business aspect of the financials was, doing the QuickBooks, doing the reporting, and then looking at them, and you're looking at them always after the fact. How do we get them real time? So that was my one quest, to make sure we automated the bookkeeping system. So right now, our point of sale that we have integrates with our online, quick. Every store pays through the technology fee. They have that. And then we have a third-party PA that does all the accounting for them on a monthly basis, pay all their bills, all their sales tax, all their, accounting stuff, so they can get a good accounting company at any time during the month or after the month. They can see where they're at, where they're growing. What's more is we have a technology stack that allows a dashboard, so franchisees across the whole chain can see where they rank on the low, medium, high of stores, so they can see what's wrong, what's out of line. Well, my payroll's too high, or I'm not doing enough advertising, I'm doing too much, or my conversion rate on my leads is not as high as the average, or whatever it may be. Because if we don't know, then it takes me to send an operation team there to look through bank statements and trying to find out what they're doing right, what they're doing before I can even start helping. So if I can see it real time with them, I can be just working on the fixing and growing them and training them, rather than trying to figure out what is actually not right.
So what's coming next with technology at Tint World? Sounds like there's some exciting things on the horizon.
Yes. So the same way I was forced to build the franchise brand that there wasn't any in the automotive aftermarket of accessories in franchising, I built it because I couldn't find one that would let me do it with them. So with that, I started to try to find software in the, now realize I'm doing brick and mortar auto services, which is a very unique model for point of sale software. And then there's a whole different type of software that goes for, mobile units to go to homes for home services. And I haven't found any that do everything I want with a complete back end that allows you to do both services with one point of sale. So your franchise have to have one for one and one for the other. So I couldn't find anybody to do it, so I just decided to build my own. The same way I built Tint World, I have to build software that's going to do everything it's supposed to do in the franchise world. And I don't want to let anything I build is not just for me or for my company. It's got to be bigger than my company and myself. So I partnered up with a company that has a significant point of sale and back end software and integrates with NetSuite and others. And so I started working with them to create the software that I need and I know everybody's going to want. What's more is I started to partner with people that have the fintech stack. So where they're going to be able to do right from the signing of a franchise agreement, the financing, credit cards, payments, and centralized billing, so they can have one centralized billing for all their vendors. A lot of really good things that are coming on. I'm building onto this system. I've helped one company that I partnered with about 6 years ago that had a really good point of sale, and they said they wanted to build whatever I said, and they did for a few years, but then they got bought out by a private equity that's got a payment system that we don't want to do what he says, we're going to do this. So if I can't get some company to do what I need, and I see there's that void and I have some intelligence to be able to figure it out, not only for me but for the whole industry, I'm going to do it. And that's what I've done with Tint World, and that's what I'm going to be doing with the software.
So your software, is it a separate brand, a separate company from the Tint World franchise?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And then emerging franchisors should get to know Charles Bonfiglio because you can save them hours and hours of time and help them advance just through technology.
Yes, there's no doubt. If you have the right systems in place, the right reporting, and everything integrated, it's going to allow you to grow without trying to piece it all together, and it's got to be affordable. So that's really where I'm building it. And by partnering with a company that's already got a lot of units in different aspects of the software, they understand it, but they don't know the nuances of what I know in franchising and in automotive and in home services. So by working with them, I'll be able to build something that's really going to be for our industry.
And what about private equity? They must be after you all the time, but you're holding on to your business.
For years I've been having them call me and talk to, and you always want to be respectful, and at the same time it wasn't something that I really was proficient in. So I like to learn. So I have spoken to some private equity, I've spoken to some M&A companies. I want to get to know who they are, what they do, and my goal was to start. I started this business with $100,000, and I wanted to get to $1 billion business with it, but it's going to be more than my lifetime if I keep going the way I'm going. So there is a possibility that we may be taking in some private equity, but if I do it, it's got to be the right partner, and it's got to be allowing me to continue some of the growth areas that I see coming up. But I don't need it, and it's a possibility. But yes, once you start getting into the into where you may be able to grow quicker with the right partners, it's not so much a money play, it's so much of the growth play.
Franchisees are always concerned about private equity. They love working with Charles Bonfiglio. They want to know that he's there to take their phone call. Private equity comes along and there's the possibility that you're not there. That's not always the case. Riverside is a great example of keeping the founders of a company or the management of a company in place after an acquisition, but not all private equity works that way. We've heard horror stories from points of view of franchisees. Are you concerned about that?
It's always a concern to make sure you're partnering with the right partner. It's a concern that you're right from an employee to a franchisee to any kind of a partner. You want to make sure whoever you're working with is going to allow you to continue to grow at the pace or actually faster than the pace you could on your own. So picking the right partner if you're going to do an acquisition is really important. Some people just chasing the money, and I don't chase the money, I chase the relationships, and that's what's really important to me.
And on that note, Charles Bonfiglio, thank you for this time today, and thank you especially for being a member of the Titus Center Advisory Board. Really appreciate your support and your knowledge and what you're doing with it in franchising. Just amazing. Congratulations to you.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate it, and I'm really happy to be part of the board.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Franchise Hot Seat Podcast with Dr. John P. Hayes. Tune in next time for more conversation around all things franchising.